webinar. So the objective of today's webinar is to give everyone a little bit of an overview of how Okta can help you to make deploying and securing your Office 365 easier and more secure. So let's have a quick look at today's agenda. So what we're going to start off with is to give you all a little bit of an overview of the Okta platform, just to set the scene in terms of what it can do overall. We're then going to move into how Okta can specifically help you around Office 365 in terms of the presentation. And then last but not least, we're actually going to give you a visual demo to actually showcase how simple it really is to integrate Office 365 into Okta to help deliver it back out to your end users and also secure that experience as well. So let's start off with Okta. So what is Okta? Okta is the market leader in identity and access management. And what this means in plain English, it's a business enabler here to enable any user in any organization to use any technology. So really connecting people to technology and doing so seamlessly. So giving that seamless end user experience when they're accessing technology, but more importantly, securing technology as well. So how does Okta do it? So Okta is a modular platform costed on a per user per module basis. And the 4 key modules you can see here on screen now. So let's start off at the bottom with Universal Directory. So Universal Directory is the foundation of the entire Okta platform. As the name suggests, it's a directory-based service. So you can store your user objects as well as your group objects inside our cloud-based directory service. Now, Universal Directory can be used standalone. So if you're using exclusively cloud-based applications that are using modern authentication, you can use Universal Directory without ever connecting to any on-premise service. In conjunction, if you have any applications that can authenticate via LDAP or via Radius, you can point them directly to Okta. However, as part of today's session, we're looking at how you can integrate Active Directory into Okta and then back into Office 365. So this is where the other part of Universal Directory comes in and why we call it universal. With a simple lightweight agent architecture, we can integrate with any on-premise directory systems that you may have, such as Active Directory or an LDAP derivative. So what that means is we can connect to those on-premise directory structures or potentially even cloud directory services and create a centralized user repository inside Okta. And what this allows us to do by bringing users into Universal Directory, we can then deliver the 3 key capabilities that we do, which are at the top of the screen now. So once we've got those users in, as I say, we then move over to start off with single sign-on. So single sign-on is all about simplifying your end user experience and making it really easy for your users to access the applications. With a single set of credentials, so 1 username and 1 password, they have complete access to all your different applications and systems that you're giving to them as part of their business function. Moving on, we have Lifecycle Management. So Lifecycle Management, whereas single sign-on is about simplifying the end user experience, Lifecycle Management is about simplifying the administrative overhead in managing users across IT systems. Essentially, it's automation to the joiners, movers, leavers process within a business. So inside Okta, we can define something as a source directory. That could be Okta itself, it could be an Active Directory or an LDAP instance, or potentially, more interestingly, a HR system. Okta can take a feed from that source system, and then based upon a simple GUI-driven interface, you can automatically provision users into downstream applications, such as Office 365 that we're going to cover today, other applications like Salesforce, or even potentially back into Active Directory. And as well as create users, we can also do things around licensing them in the systems that we're talking about, assign group memberships in those applications, and also assign permissions. And as mentioned, it's not just the create process. Every time a user object is updated inside that source system, Okta will automatically update them downstream. So if a username changes in that source system, straight away, pushed all the way down to all those downstream applications. And last but not least, when the user leaves the organization. Normally when a user leaves, there's a process to actually work out what do they have access to in the first place. Now with Okta and Lifecycle Management, where access is exclusively granted by Okta, you have a simple way to actually remove access to everything that user had instantly as soon as that user has left the organization. So we can remove their access from stopping them from logging into those systems. We can also recover those licenses they may be using as well as part of that process. So really powerful automation capabilities that not only saves time in managing users, but also it helps from a security perspective as well, because it allows us to enforce a minimum level access policy. So we can ensure users only have access to what they need when they need using lifecycle management. Moving over to Adaptive MFA, this is our capability to secure access to your applications and systems. So it's the traditional multi-factor that you may be familiar with, so the use of one-time passwords, whether that be through a hard or soft token that Okta offers you, as well as support for third parties, such as Google Authenticator and YubiKeys. Now, what's really powerful with Okta, while we can integrate with these soft and hard tokens to give you that additional level of authentication into systems that you're connecting via Okta, the more interesting part of this is why we call it adaptive MFA. So that's where we can do conditional or contextual based access policies to really drill down how people can connect to your systems. So based on who a user is, groups they may belong to, the device they're connecting from, is it a company managed device or is it an unmanaged device? What type of device it is, what type of protocol they're using to connect to a system, what their geographical location is, IP address information, what they're actually trying to connect to, are they going through a proxy, and also past behavior for that user. And we can use all those conditions to make a decision, whether to allow access but challenge a user for multi-factor authentication, or even potentially deny access. And why this is really powerful, it empowers you as an organization to control exactly how people consume your applications. Common policies include when users are inside an office location, they're not prompted for multi-factor authentication to give a cleaner, simpler end user experience. But when they're outside of the office, they're prompted for multi-factor authentication when they try to access any systems. So that's a little bit of an overview of the Okta platform and the modules it offers. And then a little bit of why Okta against the competition, because Okta has a number of properties that make it unique. So Okta was born and built in the cloud. From the day that the company was started, from the first line of code that was wrote, Okta was built as a cloud service. You can't take some on-premise piece of identity management software, put it in the cloud and get what Okta's built. You can't just put Active Directory in the cloud and get Okta. And that's really important because we take advantage of the cloud. So the cloud brings loads of benefits. The key one being, we do all that magical lifting and hosting of the infrastructure for you. All you need to do is connect it to the systems that you want to integrate with. No maintenance and management overhead required for the solution. Next, Okta is all about connecting to anything and everything. Technology is changing faster than ever before. What your users need today is different than what it was yesterday. And the only chance you have to be successful as an IT department is to be able to connect everything. So Okta is a neutral vendor. We're independent. We only do identity. We want to enable our customers to connect to the technologies they want to use. We're not trying to force you onto a particular stack. Whereas some of our competitors have their own stack, such as Microsoft with Office 365, they don't give you the flexibility to potentially use things like Google Apps, Box, or Salesforce. So we're all about allowing you to use whatever technology makes most sense for you as a business today, but also tomorrow. And that also leads down to that independence and neutrality that Okta offers. Because we only offer identity, it's all about giving you the flexibility to connect what you need to connect to as a business. Moving down to security. So if you're going to do what Okta does, managing millions of identities of the world's leading companies, you have to be 100% secure. And that's something that Okta strives hard to achieve. Not only do our products themselves make our customers more secure, we also heavily invest in our service to make sure it's secure as well. So Okta is SOC 2 type compliant, as well as ISO 27001, 27718, among other certifications inside the industry, all independently approved. And if anyone wants more information about what we do from a security perspective, we can share a white paper after the call to give you more information from that front. And lastly, the last thing I want to mention about the Okta service is this last point here about being always on. So at Okta, we have to be always on. We're the front door for every employee's access to the tools that need to do their work, because we are that middle layer between users and getting onto the application, such as Office 365, which we'll talk about shortly. And what that means is we're an important part of the business. We're a business critical application, because if we go down, it's not just a single service they lose access to, it's everything that you're putting behind Okta. So the Okta platform is designed to be always on, even during maintenance or during upgrade periods. And this is really important for our customers because it allows you to trust in us as a service to protect your most business critical applications. And I can say that the Okta service, which you can see independently in trust.okta.com, is actually hit 100% uptime during the last several years since the service's inception. And that's really important for us to give you that level of trust and assurance. So now that we've talked a little bit about Okta and what it does at a high level, I wanted to drill back into the real main goal of today's webinar, and that's showing you how Okta can simplify the deployment and also secure the deployment of Office 365 inside your organization. Now, firstly, Okta takes a different approach to our competitors when we're aiding you in deploying Office 365. We use a lightweight on-premise agent to integrate Office 365 to Active Directory and to Azure Active Directory. It requires no changes at firewall level and can run on any Windows machine with read access to your domain controller. So for this lightweight agent, it connects to your Active Directory through a service account and synchronizes user objects from AD up into Okta. And this single agent handles all communication in complete real time from your on-premise AD to Okta. It also supports delegated authentication. And what that does is it means that when you're authenticating to the Okta service, rather than authenticating to credentials stored inside Okta, you're actually authenticating directly against the credentials stored in your Active Directory. Now, this agent is the first part of the components to integrate Office 365, because that gets your users into Okta. Then from Okta to Office 365, we have a pre-built cloud-to-cloud connector that integrates those two key areas. And what that means for that cloud connector, it allows us to support user provisioning, user deprovisioning, and that user provisioning also includes role, group, and license management. And on top of that, with that same cloud connector, we can also enable federated sign-on. So for the deployment of a single lightweight agent, we can integrate AD to Okta, and then for a cloud-to-cloud connector, we can, in a couple of minutes, integrate Okta to Office 365 to give you that end-to-end provisioning process for your users, and also enable single sign-on. And when we enable single sign-on, it allows us to rapidly integrate multi-factor authentication as well. Now, one thing I always like to show to customers is, rather than actually talk about how we do it, is actually show you step by step how easy it is to integrate and deploy Office 365 of Okta. Because it means that you don't need heavy technical consultant expertise to be able to deploy it. You can do it most of the time in-house with your internal IT teams. So I'm going to jump away now from the slide deck and actually show you step by step how we do it. So I'm just going to move over to my screen here. So let me just switch over to here. So here is my Okta portal. So what I'm going to do to start off with is I'm going to log in. So I'm going to log in as my admin account. So now that I've logged into my admin account, I can see my Okta dashboard where my applications are normally published. Now, because we're actually going to show you how to deploy Office 365, this is currently empty, and I'm going to jump into my admin portal. So I'm going to jump into admin here. Now, here is a couple of things. So the first key thing to note is under what we call our universal directory system, we have a people tab. So here you can see we've got a couple of service accounts inside Okta at the moment in time, and we've not actually imported any users. So the first stage what we want to do is actually bring our users in from Active Directory inside Okta. So we're going to start off with a directory integration. So I'm going to go to Directory Integration under the Directory tab and go to Add Active Directory. So this gives a little bit of an overview of the architecture that we use. As I say, because we use an outbound communication method from your on-premise agent up into Okta, there's no firewall changes required from an inbound perspective. All we need is port 443 outbound, and you can whitelist that if you really want to do so to Okta's infrastructure. So I'm just going to click on Next, set up Active Directory, and it's going to prompt me to download the agent. So I'm going to download the agent here. And now I'm going to move over to my actual machine to install the AD agent. So I'm just going to switch over to here. So in Blue Peter fashion, I've already copied across my Okta AD agent to my virtual machine here, which is acting as my Windows member server. So I've got my Okta AD agent set up here. I'm just going to double click to initiate the install process and click yes to continue. So it's just going to guide me through the installer process now. So it's going to ask where I want to install it. I'm just going to use the default path. And here we go. It's enumerated my Active Directory domain, which is octa-demo.ga. I'm going to click next. And now it's just asking for an AD service account to speak to AD. So I'm just going to use an account that I specify. So I already created this AD service account called Okta Service, but I could have let the agent create me one if I wanted it to do so. I'm just going to provide that. Oh, seems my password is incorrect. Let's make sure I type that correctly. Seems my password may have changed. Let me just get it to create a new account here. There we go. So I just asked it to create a new account for me on my behalf called Okta Service. It's now asking if I want to use a proxy configuration to talk back out to Okta. In this case, I've got no proxy server, so I can just click next to skip past this. Now it's asking for my Okta instance that I want to connect to. So I have an Okta preview instance, and my domain name, a bit of a mouthful, is octa-demo-domain-uk. So by clicking next here, it's just asking me now to sign in with an Okta account to connect back to my Okta platform that I have, which I showed you a second ago. So I'm going to log into my Okta service account here. And I click Allow Access. And for those simple steps, I've now deployed our AD agent onto a server, and now I've initiated the Active Directory integration into Okta. Now, unlike our competitors, we actually offer the ability for high availability and load balancing, and that's all magically done for you inside the Okta Identity Cloud. So if you want to take advantage of that, all you need to do is rerun that installer on additional Windows member servers, and you would then have high availability and load balancing. It's like I say, it's all managed from the Okta Cloud platform on your behalf. So now I've clicked Finish, I can go back to my Okta portal here. So it can see that my Active Directory agent has started. Now, even though we've actually deployed the agent, we actually now need to decide how we're going to integrate with Active Directory. So the first part is my basic settings. So what OUs do I want to bring users in from? So I'm just going to untick this parent OU, and I've already pre-created a user's sub-OU here that contains all my users. Then the same for groups. It's asking me what OUs do I want to sync groups from. So again, I've got a pre-made child OU for groups here. Last but not least on this screen, it's asking me what do I want an Okta username format to be. So I want users to be able to log in with their email address to the Okta Identity Cloud. Now, by the way, any settings that we make inside Okta, they're not set for life. You can quickly change these at any point in the future as you wish. So I've chosen the OUs. I've chosen my Okta username format. I'm just going to click next. And here it's asking me what attributes do I want to sync from Active Directory to Okta. Now we can sync any AD attributes that you like. The only minimum attributes that we do need to sync explicitly are first name, last name, email address, user principal name, and SAM account name, and object GUID. Now, they're the required ones, but I'm just going to use some default ones that have been added here as well, just because I don't need to change these at any stage. So I'm just going to click next. And now I've configured my Active Directory integration into Okta. And I can come here and I can see my Active Directory integration that is now active. If I want to come back to this page, I can go to Directory Integrations, and see that domain that I've already integrated here. So I'm just going to go back here. Now, under the Settings tab, there's a few more things that we can look at here. So here I can see the health check on my agents that has just been performed, and also I can deploy more agents if I wish to do so. I can see we have delegated pass-through authentication enabled, and also the settings here to change OUs that I'm syncing from. Now, even though we've configured how we're talking to Active Directory, we've still not configured how or where we want to sync in terms of how often between Active Directory and Okta. So that's where this next set of settings comes into play here. So firstly, if we want to do an import, we can go to the Import tab up here and do a manual import. But that requires manual intervention, so that's not something that we want to do. So we're going to go back to Settings, and we're going to go to Scheduled Import. I'm going to set a scheduled import every hour. Now, some people may say here that previously you said that we can sync user objects from Active Directory to Okta in complete real time, and we can indeed do so. That's where this setting called just-in-time provisioning up here above comes into play. So what just-in-time provisioning does is it real-time synchronizes users under certain conditions. So when a user logs on or tries to log on to the Okta platform, if they're not synced up into Okta, it'll actually search in real time for that user inside your Active Directory and then completely import them during that same process, so a user can instantly log on. So essentially, as soon as you create a user object inside Active Directory, they can instantaneously log on to the Okta service. As well as also creating the user, it can also update a user. So potentially you've just deactivated a user object inside Active Directory to lock out their account. When a user tries to log on, that does a just-in-time update and changes their status to deactivated in real time. So it gives us this real-time feel as far as users is concerned, without the actual network overhead of constantly synchronizing objects between the two directory services. So I'm just going to leave that ticked up here. Moving down, I want to suppress email activations being sent to my users on this domain, and I also want to import universal security groups. Last but not least down here is my match settings. So when we import a user from AD to Okta, there's 3 different ways they could be imported. They could be determined as a new user. So that means they don't currently exist inside Okta. So if they're a new user, I want to auto confirm and auto activate them. So that means they instantly go into the Okta service and they can log on straight away. But potentially they could match a user that's already inside Okta. So maybe you're importing from 2 Active Directory instances and you want to combine them into a single account inside Okta. So this is where we govern what is an exact match. So to me, an email address must be unique across the organization. So if an email address matches, that we can govern that as an exact user, and I want to auto confirm that exact match here. For partial match, I'm just going to tick this off, but potentially you could match users based upon the first or last name, but that has a very niche user requirement here, and we're not going to enable that during this particular demo. So now I've made all those settings, I'm just going to go down and click Save. So now, rather than waiting for that scheduled import, I'm just going to trigger a manual import just to start off the process to speed up today's demo. So I'm going to click Import Now and do a full import. So what this will do is just manually trigger, as I say, this first import from Active Directory to Okta. So I'm just going to open 2 tabs here. We just want to wait for that to go through. So yeah, we can see that's completed. We've imported 17 users and we've imported 7 groups. So if I go to this Groups tab, I can see these 7 AD groups that have been imported, and I can also see the memberships have already been populated. And again, if I go to the People tab, I can see all these users that have been imported from my Active Directory. So for instance, if we look at, say, for a user called Hugo first, I can click on him and see his profile. So I can see he's been imported from Active Directory. I can see what groups that he belongs to. So here I can see he belongs to a finance and operations group. And also I can see his profile here. So his username, his email address, display name and title, all have been imported from Active Directory. So that's the first piece of the puzzle done. We've now got our users being imported from AD to Okta. Next, we want to import them into Office 365 from Okta. So if we come back up to the top here, we'll go to Applications. So we've got a few applications that we've already integrated, but I want to integrate Office 365. So if I go to Add Application, this takes us to Okta's integration network, which is essentially our catalog of pre-made integrations. So if it's pre-made, it's about as plug and play as it can get to integrate for our rich capabilities across SSO, MFA, and Lifecycle Management. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to start off and I'm going to search for Office 365. So by searching for Office 365, here, I can see we support SAML for SSO and also provisioning. So I'm going to click Add here. And then it's going to ask me for a few bits of information. So firstly, it's asking for what my tenant name is inside Office 365. So I'm going to go into Office 365 and get my tenant name. So let me just get my credentials out for Office 365. 1 second. So I'm just going to log into my super admin account here. If I go into the Office 365 admin console, and if I go to setup and domains, I can see that my tenant name is Okta demo domain. So if I go back to Okta, I can type in Okta demo domain here. It's then asking me what is my company domain that I want to federate and use for this Office 365 integration. So again, I can come back here and see that my domain name is okta-demo-domain.ga. So I'm just going to put my domain name here. And then there's just a couple of options here in terms of do you want to show links, etc. So these are the links to the various different sub-applications inside Office 365. This doesn't control who has access to them. That's done in the next tab. But this just shows visually if the user has access to that particular application in Office 365, show that them inside the Okta dashboard. So I'm just going to leave them all enabled by default. I'm just going to click Next. So Okta is now asking us what sign-on method do we want to use. So we can use secure web authentication, which is Okta's sort of password vaulting and password replaying capability, or WS Federation, which is a true single sign-on mechanism. So we want to use the proper true single sign-on mechanism for WS Federation. And to actually enable it, we have two options. We can do it by PowerShell, whereas if we click View Setup Instructions, Okta would tell us exactly with a magic variable what we need to do with a PowerShell. Or more simply, we can go and we can let Okta do it on our behalf. So providing some service account credentials here. We've now can just click Save, and we can enable Federation as simple as that. So click Done. Okta will now configure Federation on an Office 365 tenant. So we just wait for that to synchronize through. And that's now been completed. So we've now got an Office 365 application ready to go. Now, before we can actually test it with some users, we actually need to configure provisioning. So if we go to the provisioning tab, we can follow these steps to integrate here. So all we need to do is configure API integration, enable it, and provide some admin credentials. So because I've already provided some to enable SSO, I can use my same credentials to enable provisioning. And by clicking save, I now have a provisioning integration on a cloud to cloud from Okta to Office 365, ready to go. So just wait that to save through. And now you can see I've got provisioning to Office 365. I just need to finish off the configuration. So firstly, it's asking us provisioning type. So when Okta provisions to Office 365, which is something unique to itself, there are different provisioning modes that we can use. We have two basic modes that can be used in conjunction with Active Directory Connect. So we can do license and role management on top of it, or we can actually completely replace Active Directory Connect and do user or universal sync. Now, universal sync and user sync are very similar. The only difference is universal sync will also sync things like contact objects, room mailboxes, etc., into Office 365 rather than just pure user objects. So I'm going to click universal sync. And I also want to update profile groups, contacts, and conference rooms from AD into Okta. And then I just want to enable create, update, and deactivate. And when I enable deactivate, I want to choose what happens when they're deactivated. So we've got a couple of options such as blocking sign-in, removing licensing, deleting the user account, or a combination of the above. So what I want to do is when a user is deactivated inside Office 365, I want to block the sign-in, remove the licenses, and then delete them after a grace period. So I'll give a 2-week grace period to my users. And I can now click save. So now we've got provisioning configured, and we can start creating some applications and assigning users to them. So if I go to assignments, I'm just going to test with a single user to start off with. So if I go to assign to people, I'll search for Hugo first, just as a test. Now here, when I come to assign them, it's asking me what licenses and roles do I want to assign to this user. So here I've got an options of business premium, etc. And I'll actually enumerate what licenses you have available in Office 365. So I'm just going to give this user the entire Office 365 business premium suite. I'll just go through and tick all these options here. And I don't want to give them a role type. So I'll click save and go back. So then we've got Hugo should now be provisioned to Office 365. So if I go to users and active users, so we should see him populate here in a second. Let me just go back to Octave. Oh, I've just realized I need to update his username. So I had a mistake in his username here, which I've just updated in Active Directory. So it just errored because my domain didn't exist inside Office 365. So if I just click to retry that, we should now see him go into Office 365. There we go. That's just my mistake with the incorrect domain for that user. So now we're here, we can see Hugo is inside here, and we can see his license type. So that's a simple user being provisioned. So what we want to potentially do is step that up via a group. So if I go back to groups, I can see a finance and operations group here. So maybe I want to provision everyone in finance and operations into Office 365 and set a common license type. So let's do that here. So if I go back to Office 365, and rather than click assign people, I'm going to click assign groups. And I'll search for that AD group, finance and operations. And just like with Hugo, anyone that's inside this group, I want to have a business premium license. So now I can see I've got 3 users assigned to the app, which are the members of that group. Now, if I just refresh in here, just make sure they're coming through successfully. Just give it 2 seconds. There we go. I can see those users have now been synchronized into Office 365 as well. So we've got not Hugo, Hugo, and Emma. Now, one thing that we would have noticed when we go back here is that Hugo is still individual, because I originally gave him an individual assignment. So what I can do is I can click Confer Assignments. And what this will do is anyone that's been individually assigned the application, I can then convert that to their respective group assignment. So here it says for Hugo, he's actually currently managed by this finance and operations group. So I'm just going to click Convert Selected, or I could have done Convert All, to convert him to that group assignment. So that's provisioning into Office 365 really quickly using Okta. But now there's also things we can do around push groups. So if you go back to groups, you can see here we've got some Okta groups and we've got some AD groups. But one thing that's really powerful inside Okta is we can create dynamic groups and then push them out into other systems. So I'm just going to create a new group. I'm just going to call this Finance and Operations here. Now, even though we've got an AD group similar to this, I wanted to show you just how simple it is to build dynamic groups. So if I just go back to another tab, we just close this, and I'm going to go to Hugo inside Active Directory. So if I go to Hugo and Profile, I can see that his title is Finance Assistant here. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to create a simple group rule saying anyone has the title of Finance Assistant, they get input into this new group that I've created. So I go back to groups, we have group rules. So I can add rule, and I can say assign to Finance and Operations group. So I wanted to use the title attribute, so I can say if user attribute title equals Finance Assistant, they get put into the Finance and Operations group. I could also do things such as if their group membership belongs to, or if I want to get more complicated, I can go to use the Okta expression language, or I can use conditional and nested statements to dynamically populate groups on my behalf. But I'm just going to stick with a basic condition for now. I can preview it to see if Hugo will actually go into there. And I can go, yep, Hugo matches that rule, he'll get put into that group. So I can click Save, and then activate this group. If I come back to groups, I'll see that this Finance and Operations group is now being dynamically managed by this rule, and Hugo's been put in it for that rule that I've just created. So now we can push this group into Office 365. So I go back to Applications, Office 365, and I go to Push Groups. I can push groups by name or by a rule to bulk push them into the Office 365. And I'll go to Push Groups, I'll search for Finance and Operations, and push that immediately. So now I'll just wait for the confirmation to come back that group's being pushed. Now if I go back to Office 365 and Groups, I can see Finance and Operations is now being pushed in from Okta. So that's again group management. So far in Okta, we've looked at user management and group management. Now, the last step I wanted to show you today is actually how we secure that experience. So now that we've created users and we've given them access, and I'll show you the access through the user portal in a second, is how do we actually secure that by adding MFA? So let's start off, and let's go to the General tab here, and we'll go to multi-factor. So the first thing to do is work out what factors I want to use inside my environment. So we support a whole list of factors out of the box, including our own soft token app, Octave Verify, that does one-time passwords and push notifications. We have SMS authentication, voice call, Windows Hello, Mac OS Touch ID, etc., as well as a whole list of other factors here. So firstly, I want to enable Octave Verify just to start off with. Now what this does here is this says what factors I have globally across my organization. It doesn't say where they're required or who they're required for. So what I'm going to do first is go to factor enrollment and create a new policy to say who can use Octave Verify. So I'm going to create a new policy and I'll say finance and operations MFA enrollment. And I want to apply this to that newly created finance and operations group. So if anyone's in the finance and operations group, because they have access to more confidential information, I wanted to make it requirement they have to sign up to MFA. So I'm going to make it required and create a policy. And then it's asking me to configure a rule. When can people actually enroll into that factor? So I'll just say allow enrollment anywhere. So from any location, if a user is accessing Okta or any application, the first time they're challenged for MFA is the first time they're required to configure it. Using this, however, I could also say that potentially to stop malicious actors registering MFA on behalf of users, I could lock it out to certain users saying, if you're not inside an office location, you can't register to MFA. But I'm just going to allow it for anywhere for demo purposes. So I'm going to create this rule. So now anyone in this group will be required to set up Octave Verify. So now that I've got where they're enrolled onto it, I need to choose where it's required. So what I'm going to do is go to Authentication, and under here we have sign-on policies. So this is where we can govern exactly under what conditions people can sign on to the Okta service as a whole. We can also do it more granularly on a per app basis, but here is just overall into Okta at the first level through the first door. So I'm going to create a new sign-on policy called Finance and Operations again. Oh, can't spell. And I'm going to apply this to the Finance and Operations group. So I'm going to call this rule allow access but require MFA. Because again, these people have access to really important information, I want every time someone in Finance and Operations log on from any location, I want them to use multi-factor. So again, through any location, through any authentication method, through any behavior, risk, or any type of access, they have to use a specific factor sequence to log on. So they'll need to use their password, and they'll also need to use Octave Verify with push, and they can have a 2-hour-long session. You can again change the session length, so under certain conditions, if they provide more assurance into who they are, you can give users longer session. So potentially, if they're in the office, something simple will be you give them an 8-hour-long session to cover them across the course of the day. So I'll say create 2 hours. So let's actually now log on as Hugo and actually show you MFA being set up. So I'm just going to switch my screen here so I can show you MFA being set up at the same time. So let me just move my phone over. So I've got my Chrome window here again. And I've also got my mobile. So now that I've signed out of my user, I'm going to log on as Hugo first. Now, as again, he's in Finance and Operations, he's been prompted to set up multi-factor authentication. And we're going to use our Octave Verify app. So if I click on Setup, I've got an iOS device here. And it's asking me to install Octave Verify. So I've already pre-installed that on my phone over here. So if I click on Next, it's going to ask me to add an account. So if I click Add Account on my phone, I'm now going to go to my computer and scan that QR code to set up my application. So once that's set through, I've now set up Okta MFA. And because I've not logged onto this account before, it's also going to ask me to choose a security image for anti-phishing. So I'm just going to select, let's go with the sheep over here and create my account. So now I'm logged onto the Okta platform. Now, because I've only just set it up, it's not requiring me to use it yet. So to actually show you it in action, I'm going to sign out and back in to actually show you it being prompted. So again, log on as Hugo first. And it's going to ask to send push notification. And this push can also be sent automatically. So if you hit this box, from next time onwards, when they log in, the push notification will automatically be triggered to Okta. So here, I can see the request has gone to my phone saying someone has tried to log in from Stockport just now. Is it me or is it not me? So I'm going to click it, yes, it's me. And with Face ID, because you can enforce that as well, I can then confirm that is a legitimate request and then go into my Okta portal. And here I can see all my Office 365 applications. So what I can do here is click on sign in and be jumped into Office 365. Now what I'm just going to do is I'm actually going to just sign out of here because I've got a session of my admin account, just to not to confuse Office 365. I'm just going to click sign out there. So now if I click on the Office 365 admin portal on Hugo, it's now going to sign me in, and I'm getting my prompt saying this is the first time you've logged in. Please continue. So that is single sign-on into Okta and into Office 365. Now, what's great about Okta is because we're doing true federated single sign-on, we've secured the access if people go into the Okta portal to access Office 365. But one question people often ask is, what if people bypass Okta and go straight to Office 365? I'm just going to do that just now. So if I open up an incognito window and I go to the Office portal, if I now try logging as Hugo, which is hugo.first at Okta, spelled Okta wrong there, Okta demo domain.ga, it's actually redirecting and forcing me to log into Okta continue. So if I actually want to continue, just like before, I log in with my credentials, do a push notification, confirm that's me with Face ID, and then I'm straight into Office 365. So that's a demo of how we do it. So hopefully you can see how simple it actually is to integrate rich single sign-on provisioning and MFA capabilities between Okta and Office 365, as well as carrying out AD integrations. I'm now going to jump back into an open question session. So if anyone has any questions at all about what they've seen today, or anything at all, please feel free to ask questions and I'll do my best to answer them now.